Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy days. My name's Gregory. I am one of the directors here at Ten2Two, joined by my colleague Tracey. We are very pleased to be here with you this evening to take you through creating a winning CV. We know how hard it is to put together a CV, how people struggle to say nice things about themselves and to cast their minds back through their careers, normally because their roles have been diverse and changing, and it's a bit of a minefield. So we're really hopeful that this next 45 minutes will give you some hints, tips and tools to navigate your way through putting together a really strong CV. Now, don't worry about writing extensive notes. Of course you can if you want to, but please don't worry. Just relax and enjoy, and try and absorb as much of the information as possible. We will be following up with a couple of guidance documents, and we are recording this evening as well, so that it can go onto YouTube and my jazz hands can be forever immortalized. So yeah, please just relax and enjoy. We will have a question and answer session at the end. There is a Q&A box available to you if you want to ask questions during. If they're particularly poignant, we will try and get to them during the presentation. If not, we'll try and get to them at the end. And if we don't get to them at the end, then we will follow up with a Q&A document, hopefully tomorrow, but maybe a little bit later in the week. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the lovely Tracey Adams to take you through our slides, and enjoy.
Thank you, Jo, and welcome to everyone here. And the numbers are still going up a little bit, but we'll keep going. So this is a whistle-stop tour, really to take you to what a great CV would look like. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, then we'll go to the summary and Q&As. We're going to cover quite a few basic things, but hopefully no matter where you are with your CV, you will pick up some useful tips. And as Jo said, we'll send some stuff out at the end as well, tomorrow rather, sorry, or Friday. Not going to overpromise for Jo. So without further ado, let's go on to the agenda. So it's quite packed, half an hour. So first of all, right at the outset, why do a CV? Where do you start? Because that's daunting. Sometimes it's the starting that can take ages. Once you get going, it's probably fine. But where to start? Some basics we'll cover, the functional stuff you really do need on there. Then probably the chunkiest part of this is going to be the main components. What's in there? We prefer this kind of order. So looking at a profile, followed by your key skills, then your career history, and that's the one which takes time to get right, education, and then other information. And that's just a format that we feel works. What to avoid, and at the very end, a quick recap of that and time for Q&A. So each of the slides, we're going to go forward now and just pick up on each of those points. So please do pop your questions in the Q&A as we're going along. So why a CV? So first and foremost, the purpose of this is for you to secure an interview or to get that assessment to go to an interview. You want a hiring manager or recruiter to read your CV immediately and put it on their yes pile, and not their, oh, maybe I've got question marks over that pile. You want it to be an absolute yes, and that's what we're going to try and talk you through today. It's still the primary currency for jobs. There is talk of, doing a video for an interview or using LinkedIn. But I would say 99% of our clients ask for a CV. I can't even think actually of a time when someone has asked me for anything but. So CVs are still massively important. It is a selling document. It is your little sales leaflet. It's your sales tool, and it has to be well presented. So you have to think of it as just a foot in the door, a sales document. It's not a tome of your history from the minute you started work and every single thing you've done in between. So we'll also give you some tips on how to make it more succinct. And it's also a script for talking about your career. So when you're compiling this, think of it as a document that you could picture the hiring manager, whoever they are, HR hiring manager in front of you, using this to help them interview you. So include things on there that you're comfortable talking about. And again, we'll go into detail, but just think of it that way as well. It's just a conversation starter, as well as getting you in the door. It does a lot of things, this CV, actually, hence it's so important. It has to be tailored for the role you're seeking. And I will go on about this quite a lot in almost every slide. I think I'm guilty of this before sort of my recruitment career. I would just keep bolting on my most recent job, and it was getting longer and longer and longer. And you forget to go back to the older bits. You always just jazz up the more recent bits. So you've really got to look at that CV every time you apply for a job and just consider if it's relevant and is it tailored. And finally, it's got to highlight the experience relevant for the role. So it's that's saying the same thing, it's tailoring it for that particular role that you're going for.
And so, I think, Tracey, just sorry to butt in, because those last couple of points make it sound quite scary. But you can trust us when we say that it's not a massive job to tailor your CV. Once you get in the practice of it, it's a simple few extra minutes, just maybe moving some bullet points around or editing some of the language. And it is such a powerful process to go through before submitting that CV. Because it means that not only have you got a sales document, but you've got a sales document that really, really reflects what that employer is looking for. So I'll let you carry on.
Well, no, that's a really good point. And as we get on to that chunky bit, which is the core content that I flagged up on the agenda, each of those sections can have a tweak. There can be a tweak. And as Jo said, it doesn't have to be a rewrite. It's a tweak in each one. And we'll talk about that as we get to it and explain. So where do you start? This is the daunting bit probably, but it doesn't need to be. It's just, I think, first of all, your work mindset. This isn't the kind of thing that you could just try and do in between other jobs at home. I think you really need to set the time aside. I'd allow 2 hours initially, 2 or 3 hours to get your head down, peace and quiet, turn your phone off and just start to think about how you're going to approach this and get something on paper. The hardest part is getting them on paper or looking at an old CV that you're reworking. And sometimes, I think my advice would be, if like mine, your old CV was getting longer and longer and longer, it sometimes just needs a complete stop from scratch. But again, don't worry, we've got a template you can use. We can send a template out, so you've got the format. It's just a case of populating it. Consider your audience. It could be anyone from the hiring manager, so the person who knows that job inside out that you're applying, who's going to see it. Could be the recruiter or the HR person who might know a fair amount about the job, but maybe not everything. Could be a junior person who's just been told to look for core words and filter out CVs if you don't have a certain word in it. Or it could be, more commonly now, I don't say it's commonly, but growing, is AI or technology searching your CV for certain words. So I'd potentially err on the side of caution and say, at the very sort of least, it's going to be a system that's looking at your CV that needs to see certain words. They've got to see certain words on it, and that's what we'll go on and talk about. So just think about all the different kinds of people who could read that CV. And when you go through the process, with us, we're fairly relaxed. We like to get to know you, and that's how we work. And we're people, we're not a system, we're not a computer. And we'll have a good idea of who the CV from us is going to at the other end. But if you're applying not through us or another agency, you don't necessarily know. Be clear on your work goal. So here, in your mind, you're coming back and you want to work in a part-time role back in maybe your profession that you've been away from, for example. Be clear that that's exactly what you want in your mind. And when you come to write, that's got to be expressed. And usually that comes up in the profile. So just be clear on what you're trying to achieve. You want to have a part-time, flexible work, to be challenged again back in your preferred profession, whatever that is, for example. And then create your basic outline and then start populating it. So the first three are your thinking, just getting your head around it. And then the fourth is, right, let's get it all on paper. And we've got the template we can share, and you can start working with that. So basics. I mean, you'll know this, but you might not know some of the tweaks, but you know, you'll recognize a lot of this. And obviously your name at the top, clearly. One thing that I hadn't put on here that I just thought about was, you know, often we see a whole load of space at the top, or space taken up with, you know, so Tracey Adams, curriculum vitae, Tracey Adams resume. Doesn't need to say resume or curriculum vitae. We know it is, so don't worry about that. Have your core contact details. All we would recommend is an email address, a mobile number, typically, and possibly your town or city. I would probably put something to do with location, but not your whole address. We need a postcode in our system to be able to find you and send you jobs, but I wouldn't share your data willy-nilly. You know, just a town will do to give them an idea of where you're based. LinkedIn, if you've got a LinkedIn profile, put it on there if it's okay. If it needs work, don't put it on yet. At its very least, it's just a LinkedIn page that mirrors your CV. So just you know, make sure it mirrors the dates and the titles, the job titles that are on your CV. Some jobs don't need a LinkedIn profile. You know, certain sectors, it isn't essential. Some jobs, if you're in sales, business development, absolutely, your LinkedIn profile should be brilliant. If you're going into sales and business development, you'll probably be in sales and business development, so you'll probably have a lot of connections and an active LinkedIn profile. So put it on there. And it's something else a recruiter can go and look at for backup for information, and make sure your photo is professional on there as well. Basics for us, this is basic, and a lot of people get them wrong. Just with a fresh pair of eyes, when you've done this, look at your font, your size of font. Is it consistent? Are dates consistent? The format. So the format is much better in a straightforward Word document. If you do lots of fancy stuff and tables and graphics, and then you add it and make it a PDF, when that PDF goes through the process, it'll be un-PDF'd for hiring managers or HR recruiters to use, and the formatting will go. So my suggestion would be a straightforward Word document. You can make it different with headings in slightly different sized font and colour and bold, but as long as it's consistent. And use bullets rather than streams of text and sort of paragraphs. Joe?
Sorry, I might
I
interrupt
could
a
see
few
you
times.
unmuted.
Just to begin with one kind of deviation from that, obviously, if your role is design-led, then it might be worth having a more design-led CV. However, what Tracey's saying still applies, that you should have a Word document to partner that. So, you know, think about having two CVs, one that is a more simple Word document that shows the chronology of your career, and then your design-led. You might even have a portfolio or something. So that would be the only kind of deviation from that.
And absolutely. So even as a designer, I wouldn't do anything too fancy, but link to your design portfolio. You probably have a better eye on formats and fonts, you know, fonts and things, but certainly I'd say link to the portfolio. Length. So we know the whole, you know, everybody says 2 pages. 2 pages is lovely if you can. Don't get too hung up on it. So don't shrink your font down to 0.6 so you can fit it on 2 pages. You know, we'll talk about ways and means of getting that down to 2 or 3. If it's 3, so be it, doesn't matter. But I say that because bear in mind that when a hiring manager, a HR person, junior, whoever it is, looks at your CV, they won't spend long. They will spend seconds on it. That fair to say, Joe? I think seconds. And they will glance at the profile, they'll glance at the skills, and they'll glance probably at the first couple of jobs on the first page. I don't know many that will, until they're further down the process, get through to the second page and start reading in tons of detail. I know
there are some really interesting statistics. There are some interesting statistics out there that 90% 90% of the first page is read, 50% of the second page, and pretty much nothing after that. And those statistics have probably changed. They're quite old, those stats. They've probably changed considerably since the rise of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, remember, what we're trying to get you to do is create a CV that will go on the yes pile. So that front page particularly is going to be super important. So length still important, I'm afraid. You can't get away from 2 or 3 pages. Relevance, again, make sure this contributes to the length. So make sure what is on your CV is relevant to the job that you are applying to. If you've had previous roles many years ago, you started out in retail, but you're now in marketing, you don't need anything on that retail job other than perhaps a date, a company name, and a job title. You know, it's just not relevant. It's good so we know chronologically and you haven't got any gaps, but it's not necessary if you're going for a marketing job because you've been in marketing for 20 years. Education, similarly, you know, when you get to a certain stage in your career, unless someone specifically asks for what your GCSE or O levels were, it's not really important. Some clients ask. We do push back on those because by the stage you get to sort of our age stage in life, you typically doesn't really matter. But certainly if there's education you've had on there that it could be lots of extra courses that you've taken in a particular company, you don't need to list everything unless it's relevant, and that helps bring the size down, the length down. Photo, I'm not a fan. I don't mind them on there as long as they look professional. I don't think you need photos on there. Some hiring managers or recruiters might think differently. I'm ambivalent. I don't mind, but as long as it is professional, you know, it's not you on the beach with your family or out in the pub with your mates. So those are the main basics, and just a sentence there that pretty much explains what we're trying to say. So keep your CV as easy to read as possible, and that way you'll maximize your chances of getting noticed and getting onto that yes pile. So let's go on to the main components. So these are the sort of pattern that the sort of format we typically think works the best. So let's look at profile first. Your profile is a short paragraph right at the top of your CV, 4 lines, maybe 5 lines, and it just encapsulates in a nutshell who you are and what field you're in. And at this point, you need to include really relevant words that are relating to the job. And when I say mirror, I mean literally mirror. So if the job advert says we are looking for a dynamic CIM qualified marketeer, your profile should say, I am a dynamic CIM qualified marketeer. You know, I'm looking for a challenging part-time role in the financial services sector. Something like that. It's succinct. It says what you are, what you're looking for. And this paragraph is also an opportunity to sell your skills and experience. So don't be shy. If, say, in 15 years, you've never missed a target, that's something really important to say right up front. You can say it in that paragraph. So this is your pen profile. It captures you in literally 4 sentences. And that is something that I think people do read quickly. So that's where the words need to jump out. And this is the other part that is, and again, just going back to where we said about tweaks. So this pen profile, it's only 4 sentences. You can chop and change with this. You can change the words according to what the job description is, and you can maybe throw something else in and take a line out. And the other part is this one is right on the first page as well. So we go next with your key skills. It can be presented like this, say as a list of 7 bullets, 8 bullets, no more. Just the key skills, and make sure that they link to the job ad. You might have extra, which is fine, but this is so easy to play around with when it comes to just tweaking and making some more relevant and some at the top, more important, and drops them down. So here, just make them brief words. You don't want sentences. You don't want bullets of sentences. You just want core words. Reorder them when you need to highlight it. And in here, if the role needs a certain tech or software, it's a core part of the job, mention it here as well. So this stuff is the straight in your face stuff that they will see. So really important. Career history. So this is the bit that feels like it's going to take a long time, but actually it shouldn't, because you don't need to put absolutely everything you've ever done. We do like it. I think everybody likes it chronologically, with the most recent first, and then it needs to tell a story. It does need to have every single date on there. So if you've had a career break, or you're in a career break now, you must put that in. And you can say it in a good way. You know, it doesn't, you better be truthful. It's best to be truthful. So if, you know, September 2018 to present, I've been, you know, I've been staying at home looking after the family, but I'm now ready to return to work in a challenging position, full stop. You know, if there in that time you have done some interesting voluntary type work, and it might contribute to the job, or it might be helpful, put that in as well. You know, I've been since September 2018, I've been staying at home looking after my family, but I've also juggled that with working for such and such charity in a voluntary finance position. And then go back over about 15 years in detail, not loads of detail, 4 or 5 bullets for each job. But again, you can tailor these. You can take some bullets out and make some jobs smaller. You can increase some with more bullets if you think it's relevant. There might be some of those companies or some of those jobs that are more relevant for what you're applying for. Anything over 15 years, I'd say shrink down to pretty much a one-liner, which just has the dates, the job title, the role. If there is some relevance to the job you're going for, maybe put a bullet or 2 in. If there's no relevance at all, just leave it as that. You know, they can see that between 1995 and 1997, you were a manager of a retail shop. That's it. That's all you need to do if you're not going into retail again. So we do sometimes get asked the question, you know, but actually the career I'm going back to, a lot of the good stuff was earlier on. And if I don't include much of it, it's not really selling me. So in that case, do what I've just said, you know, shrink the more recent stuff, but make the older stuff that is really relevant more important. I'm not saying it's set in stone. It doesn't have to be 15 years cut off and that's it. It's a judgment call and it's a balance. But that's how you can play around with the roles. In the roles themselves, in each job, sort of avoid industry speak and acronyms, because you don't know, again, who's going to be reading it. But focus on your achievements particularly. So try not to do simply what the tasks were in the job, but try to pull out those key achievements. Use data to really strengthen those in terms of sales achieved, percentage increase of something. You know, I'll give you an example on the next slide, actually, that's quite good. And use action verbs as well. So I think I used to do this all the time. I was responsible for, which is fine. It's fine. You know, it reads okay. You do that sometimes, and you might need to do that sometimes. But where you can, throw in action verbs. You know, I managed a team of. I led a communication strategy. It's those action verbs. Just make it a bit more interesting and powerful. So those are some tips on the career part. Just a couple of other things, actually. So if you've got quite a few short roles or assignments or interim, for example, you know, people can have short roles because of a number of life reasons. It could be redundancy, relocation, maternity, ill health. You know, if you've got a few of those, that might put a question mark in the hiring manager. So put a reason for leaving. So you might have had 2 redundancies, one after the other. And if they can see that that's what it was, and then maternity, that all makes total sense to them. This is where if there's any question marks at all, they'll just put you on the maybe pile, and they'll probably never get back to the maybe pile. So you want to be on that yes pile. Maternity, again, as I've said, put that on. Traveling, put that on. You want your chronological dates to line up, no gaps.
We're getting quite a lot of questions through about the return to work and the gaps. So just for those of you who are concerned or want further information, next month we are actually running a brand new webinar about gaps.
Yeah.
Which hopefully will answer a lot of your questions. We will try and get to them, but obviously there's a lot more content in today's webinar, and that webinar will be specifically about those career gaps, especially recent ones, especially if you are returning to the workforce. So hopefully you'll be able to join that, and we'll answer all your questions then.
Yeah, because you can put positive things in there to make it positive, you know, and career gaps are normal, absolutely normal, really are, you know, you don't need to worry about it, you're not unusual at all. So yeah, we will cover that in detail, otherwise I'll go off a tangent today. So this is an example of some of those things I've talked about. Oh, and one of the things actually which I didn't talk about here, you can see marketing manager company X, there's the dates. Keep the dates consistent. That's one thing we see all the time. You know, my earlier career, I might have had my dates written January the 18th, something, you know, here it's Jan 18, just make sure that's consistent. One thing I didn't mention, if you have worked in SMEs, so small businesses that maybe aren't well known, they don't have a good brand name, they're not well known, put a simple sentence like this that explains what the company does, and that'll put your role into context for whoever's reading it. So company X is a leading distributor of PPE products in the UK. And here, you know, the reason for leading, just to put where you can put it, quite simply, small font, little italic, just a message for them. And there's some action verbs for you as well, designed and implemented, you know, redesigned company website. And there's also some data to support those achievements in there as well. So that's not necessarily a list of the responsibilities, that's picking out some core stuff. So I hope that gives you an example of the career history, and that is a really chunky part of the CV. So moving on, after that, if you've got, I wouldn't say if you've got space, you should be putting in education, training and other. It depends what your education, training and other is, you know, and how much of it you put in and how relevant it is to the job. With education, always start with your highest level. PhDs, masters, degrees, A-levels. I tend not to put, if you've only done GCSEs and O-levels and you left, then put them in. You know, if you left at 16, which you could do in my day, I don't think you can now, I think you have to stay to 18. Put them in if you want, but just many clients aren't really interested, and if they are, I often don't think it should be a criteria to decide on at this stage in our careers. Relevant training, I did once have a CV that was 2 pages worth of training courses that someone had been on, in addition to the CV, which was all lovely, but half of them, a lot of them, more than half, weren't necessary for the job they were going for. So just include what's necessary. If you've got letters after your name, by all means put them on your name at the top of the start of the CV. It takes up no extra space. And then additional information. So make this brief, factual and interesting. And there is, you know, there's 2 schools of thoughts, I think, about how relevant it is to put your interests on there. Sometimes people drop them off, sometimes they add them. I think it's quite nice. And I think it can be, it's not necessarily going to get you an interview, but if you get an interview, it might be a conversation starter and an icebreaker. And it might give you some connection to the interviewers. So just to give you an example, I mean, I don't know, you might say, I love running half marathons, eating cakes and hot air ballooning. And I say hot air ballooning because it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen someone say they love as a hobby. But lo and behold, the job they were going for, the interviewer was a hot air balloon fanatic. So it didn't particularly get them in the door for the interview, but my goodness, when they met, they had a cracking interview. Person didn't get the role, but they weren't right for the role, but actually it was a good conversation starter, and you never know, and it makes it a bit more personal and human. So now you've done that, all that bit, check, double check, triple check, put it down, come back to it a day later, give it to family and friends and say, does this reflect me? You know, does this seem like me? And look at it from the point of view as, are there any question marks? Is someone going to ask, you know, is there something missing here? That doesn't read properly. I don't understand that. ask someone close, not even close to you, maybe an old colleague who you're happy to share it with. You need get some other pairs of eyes on it to see if there's any question marks. So that's the CV. We've rattled through that. See, it's taken me 20 minutes. Is it? I don't know how much time we've got left, Joe. Pitfall.
We're just on 1/2 past, so
okay,
we're starting to eat into the Q&A time.
Okay,
but
right.
I'm
So don't
busy
lie.
answering questions as you speak.
Yeah. Don't lie. Obviously, it'll come back to bite you. Achievements you're confident about. As you're writing your CV, you might well start to remember some of the stuff you did a few years ago. And if you're getting excited about that and you're putting it on your CV, that's brilliant, because you'll probably come to light in the interview when you're talking about that achievement. So don't put stuff on that you're really vague about, that you're going to struggle in an interview to explain. Just the stuff you're really confident about. And just, there we go. Beware of CV building packages. They have formats, you know, they have those complex formats. It's sometimes difficult for you to change, and also the systems won't read them brilliantly. I'm not saying avoid CV writers, but just the sort of the packages that build them up for you. As we've said, fancy fonts, formatting, just make it quite straightforward and consistent. Long acronyms, we've said, unexplained gaps. I know we've had lots of questions about gaps, but chronologically, all the dates should line up, and anything that raises a question. So just to quickly summarize, this is really what we've said. It needs to be an easy read, concise, comprehensive, descriptive and personal. Be relevant to the role, that tweaking all the time. And it doesn't have to be big tweaks. It can be small tweaks. Reflecting the sector, profession and transferable skills. Leave no question marks. Chronologically, a clear journey on your CV. And your aim is to get the interview or to a yes pile. Questions. There we go. Sped up. Joe, any questions?
Hi, sorry, I was just answering a question as you were speaking. So thank you everybody for asking some questions. Some of you I've come back to whilst Tracey's been talking, and some of you we will go through now. A lot of the questions that have come through have been very, very personal in nature, which I completely understand, and we're always more than happy to discuss personal matters with people. For that reason, we're not sharing all of the questions on the screen tonight. We will extrapolate the more generic questions and share a Q&A document. Anyone who has asked a slightly more personal question, I've either already come back to you with my email address for you to drop me a quick note, and for us to catch up with that query or line of querying separately. And I will go through the rest, and if there's anyone who I do feel we need to speak to individually, then we will come back to that. So just to put that out there, some people are asking if they can see all of the questions. That's why we're not publishing the questions on the webinar this evening. But thank you very much for your questions. There have been a lot of questions about photos on CVs. It's a no. There is no reason to put a photo of yourself on a CV for many reasons. A couple of people have hit the nail on the head, in that it can lead to discriminatory decisions being made, and they will always be unconscious bias coming through, but it's just best to avoid. It's also very difficult to get a good professional CV on a photo, and if you put a photo of you and your kids, or I don't know, out at a party or something, then it's not going to show you in your most professional light. Again, lots of questions about career gaps. Some of you I have contacted, and we will come back to you individually. Please do join the Mind the Gap webinar that we're running next month. If you can't wait until next month, then please do get in touch with one of us before then, and we can support you with these. As Tracey said, do not worry. Career gaps are so normal. They are almost expected. You know, we're only human. We're not built to work from 18 to 60 or 21 to 60s. People have gaps. And given who we are and our main candidate base, we are all very, very understanding of gaps of all shapes and sizes.
And I would add, Jo, quickly, I think we deal with clients who come to us because they know what they're getting in terms of candidates.
Absolutely.
And they know there's going to be gaps. So if you go directly to companies or through other recruiters and there's lots of questions about you having a gap to have children, they're not the company to work for. I mean, if that's the kind of attitude and it's a bit, that's weird, then it's not. So if you come through us, it's just our bread and butter.
Absolutely. And those reasons for gaps are becoming broader and broader in our candidate base. So with the aging population, we have so many people come to us who've had a career break, maybe to look after a parent or just to support a partner through ill health or whatever it might be.
And their own ill health. We have people
absolutely,
and it's fair to you can share that.
Absolutely.
And
again, it's at your discretion how much information you share. It's at your discretion whether you kind of dig deep and share a lot. And it's also up to you whether you share what you have been up to. So, Tracey's example of volunteering, some people might not have been able to volunteer while they've been off looking after their kids because they've been looking after their kids. So, that's fine too. There is nothing wrong with anything. And there's always a positive to be reflected on your CV from it. Please don't worry. So other questions that we've got, there's again a lot of questions about the maximum number of skills or the maximum number of bullet points. There are no real rules around maximum numbers. The main thing to consider, and Tracey, please do correct me if you think anything that I'm saying is wrong. The main thing to consider is the relevance for the job that you're applying for. So if you have 10 skills and they're looking for those 10 skills, put those 10 skills down. You'd rather have 10 ticks than 5 if you've got 10 ticks to give.
Absolutely.
The same with your bullet points for your roles. If you've done 10 different things within that role that are relevant for the role that you're applying for, then write all of those 10 things down. If you only did 2 things in that role that are relevant for the role that you're applying for, maybe only write those 2 things. But if you've got space, put some more in, make the role as broad and as full as it was.
Sorry, Jo, go on. And what I'd say was to compensate, if you're worried that you're, the most recent few jobs, you've had some fantastic bullet points, if that's going to sell it, those 2 or 3 recent jobs are going to sell you in. So all the other stuff, it could just be one-liners because, so it's just thinking about where you put the quality of content. Is it up front in these 2 jobs? Is it a bit further down? It's just judging what's going to sell you the best, what job, what functions, what responsibilities, achievements are going to sell you the best. And putting your emphasis and focus on those.
Absolutely. It is ultimately a sales document, and that in itself can make some people that in some cases that can make some people feel uncomfortable because the idea of selling themselves is something that is quite alien to them. And that's why it's good to have help. It's good to pull in favors from family, from friends. You can use us, you can use other recruitment professionals. I would avoid using CV writing companies, as Tracey said, because they are more often than not, and this isn't all of them, relatively generic. And this is there is an element of your ability and your personality almost that comes across in a CV. Questions about freelance and whether it's looked down on in a CV? Not at all. No. We work with some exceptional people who have worked on a freelance basis because they're doing other things. That is a very, very normal way to manage career gaps when you still caring responsibility when you still need to be earning, is to set yourself up as a freelancer or a sole trader. Again, as Tracey said, make sure that it is represented on your CV that it is a freelance agreement. So you literally put the words freelance in brackets after the job title, or interim if it's an interim arrangement. Then you don't need to put the reason for leaving because it's self-evident in the fact that it was a freelance arrangement. But they're not looked down on at all. In fact, I think more and more in in the current world, it's seen as a positive that you've got the get up and go to set yourself up as a freelancer and to get out there and to find yourself clients. You know, it's not an easy thing being a freelancer, and businesses know that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to go through the other questions. There's loads coming through now. There's some questions about references. Again, today's topic is really more about CVs. So I wouldn't put your references on the bottom of a CV. It's quite an old-fashioned thing to do now. References probably won't be collected until a much later stage in the recruitment process anyway. And you should be asked separately for your reference details, so they don't need to go on there.
You don't even need to add now references supplied on request. You know, it's just a given. It could save you space, save you a line. Don't
absolutely
that.
Absolutely. And if anybody does have any separate questions about references, then please do get in touch with us separately, and we can cover those at another time. 6 months between roles is considered a gap. Yes. Anything that raises a question mark. I always joke, and one day it's going to trip me up, but I always think that the employer might think, oh, they were in prison for 6 months. Hopefully you weren't.
I've had that one.
Yes.
Now that's another conversation.
Yes. Again, there's quite a lot of very personal questions here. A really open-ended question. How do I tailor a CV? Tailoring a CV, as Tracey kind of alluded to, it really is a case of mirroring the job description. So you'd sit with the CV in one hand, the job description in another, and make sure, without lying, that the two of them look as similar as possible. So mirror the language, mirror some of the wording, make sure that you are pulling out what is relevant in your CV to make it look as much like the job description as possible. You basically want whoever reads your CV, whether it's a junior, a hiring manager, a director, to feel like they're reading their job description, because then they're just going to be bowled over by how perfect you are for that role, and you'll go on the top of that yes pile, not just in it, but at the top of it. We're running out of time. Oh, thank you. That's really nice. There's lots of messages coming through thanking us for our time. So well done, Tracey.
And Joe. We like talking about CVs. We could talk about CVs till the cows come home.
It's quite sad how geeky
it's a big subject.
gets about these things. It is quite sad. So we're not going to go back over the slides, but the slide pack can be sent out and the recording will be available. So anyone who wants to go back to a slide, please don't worry, this information will be available. Date of birth, you do not need to put your date of birth on a CV. It's absolutely no longer necessary. Similarly with dates for education, if you feel that it's something you don't want to share, you really don't need to. Sorry, Tracey.
I think with that one, more and more I'm seeing, I think if you're getting into your 40s and 50s and 60s and you're worried about that, you could just put where you went to, with the education, not the dates. They might come back and ask, but they'll be able to tell probably from your jobs anyway. So, and again, if an employer gets funny about that and is funny about your age, which they shouldn't be, but if they do, then they're not the kind of place you want to work, if they're demonstrating that kind of reaction. And again, we've got clients who typically are much, much more open-minded when they come to us. So you might get that if you're going direct somewhere else. But yeah.
Absolutely. And one last question that I think a lot of us have toyed with in the past or present. When formatting a document, is it okay to use colours for headings or boxes? You can use whatever colours you want. I would personally advise just to stick to a black and white document, however, because the chances are, as we've said, this will be being reviewed by a machine or a system at some point. You don't want to upset that. You don't want to make the document look childish or unprofessional. I understand that you want to visually stand out. Can almost guarantee that it is the content of your CV that will make you stand out more than its presentation. So as long as its presentation meets the criteria that Tracey went through, so it's neat, legible, consistent, all of those other things, then please don't worry about trying to make it all bells and whistles, because the chances are you're going to detract from that brilliant content rather than bring people's attention to it.
Yeah.
That is all the time we have for this evening. I'm really sorry that we didn't get to all of your questions. They're still coming through. Thank you all so much for those. We will try and come back to you individually where necessary, or in a group document. Our contact details are on the screen now. Please scribble them down and get in touch with us. We will try and come back to you with as much personalised support and information as we possibly can, because that's what we like to do at 10 to 2.
Give us a couple of days. 53 questions. Looking at here.
Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy days. It's nothing that anybody ever enjoys, putting together a CV. So we really do hope that this evening has helped alleviate some of that concern or answer a few of your questions. We will follow up with some documents. You will receive a link to the recording, I think.
Yeah, and you'll get the CV template
in the coming days.
To get you going as well.
Yeah, and we'll get the template out to you. That template is not be all and end all. It's just a suggestion. Please don't feel as though you have to follow our template. It just is there as a helping hand more than anything else. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thank you. Bye.